Hello viewers, I Nilofer Zirgam welcome you to one of the chapters on statistics, collection and classification of data. In this script, we'll study the meaning of collection and classification of data, its objective and its types. We have also discussed the ways in which available data can be classified, and we have also determined the methods of presenting the statistical data. Also, different categories of data required for statistical analysis are also discussed. But we must first understand the following concepts before proceeding further. In the previous chapter, we talked about the process of data collection. The collected data are usually contained in schedules or questionnaire, but that is not an easily accessible form. The answer will require some analysis if their salient points are to be brought out. The first step in statistical analysis is to obtain the data. The data may be categorized into two classes. Primary data, it is the data collected by means of a census or survey. Secondary data, it is the data obtained from published or unpublished results of someone else's survey or census. Whenever a data is needed on a particular field of inquiry, it is always better to see that any data have already been collected for the same, as this is very much cheaper than having to collect data afresh. The main sources of secondary data may be government departments, trade association companies, published statistics of UNO, EEC, etc. After the data in a statistical investigation collected, it should be arranged in an orderly fashion for the purpose of comparison and interpretation. Thus, the need for classification of data arises. According to Connor, classification is the process of analyzing things in groups of classes according to their resemblance or affinities, and give expression to the unity of attributes that may subsist amongst a diversity of individuals. Thus, the process of analyzing data in groups of classes according to resemblance or similarities is, in technical parlance, called classification. The first one, classification is the division of whole data into different groups. Second point, the basis of grouping is uniformity of attributes. Third one, the classification is made according to the purpose of inquiry. Fourth one, the total of items in different classes should be equal to the total of all the items in the universe. First one, to rid the data of its complex nature and render it easy to understand by eliminating the unnecessary details. Second objective, to indicate the points of similarity and dissimilarity clearly. Third objective, to give details in condensed form. Fourth point, to institute the logical and orderly arrangement of data. Fifth point, to enable the comparison to be made and conclusion to be drawn without the necessity for considering directly hundreds of individual numbers. The first one is qualitative, that is according to some attributes. Second one is quantitative, that is in terms of magnitudes. Third one is temporal, that is on the basis of time. And the fourth one is spatial, that is geographical, that is area wise, example cities, districts, etc. Now let's come to the first one, qualitative classification. The data of descriptive nature can be classified according to the attributes such as sex, color of hair, literacy, religion, etc. Things or person possessing the qualities in common are placed in one class. This type of classification may be further broken into two heads. First one, simple classification. The data are divided on the basis of presence or absence of attributes or qualities. Second one, manifold classification. It is when more than one attribute is studied, the data would be divided into number of classes, resulting in a subdivision of the classes themselves. Now the second one, quantitative classification. It refers to the classification of data according to some characteristics that can be measured, such as height, weight, etc. In this type of classification, there are two elements given as the first one, the variable, that is the weight, the frequency, that is the total number or length in each class. Now let's come to the third point, that is temporal classification. It refers to when data are observed over a period of time. For example, we may present the figures of population or production, sales, etc. as given in the table. Now let's see, this is the table here, table 1. The fourth point, spatial or geographical classification. The data depicts phenomena at different physical location. It is essentially a type of quantitative or qualitative distribution, but it generally considered as a distinct classification. Spatial classification are usually listed in alphabetical order for easy reference. For example, data relating to XYZ companies' exports trade with various countries during the year 1995 to 96 is given as in the table 2. It is difficult to lay down any hard and fast rules for classifying the data, as a type of classification depends largely on the nature of the given data and the object of classification. However, the following general considerations may be borne in mind for ensuring meaningful classification of data. The first one, the number of classes should preferably be between 5 and 15. However, there is no rigidity about it. The classes can be more than 15 depending upon the total number of items in the series and the details required, but they should not be less than 5 or 6, because in that case the classification may not reveal the essential characteristics. The choice of number of classes basically depends upon the number of figures to be classified, the magnitude of the figures, the details required, and the ease of calculation of further statistical work. Second point, as far as possible, one should avoid odd values or class intervals, example 3, 7, 26, 39, etc. Preferably, one should have class intervals of either 5 or multiples of 5 like 10, 15, 20, 25, 50, 100, etc. The reason is that the human mind is accustomed more to think in terms of certain multiples of 2, 5, 10, and the like. However, where the data necessitate a class interval of less than 5, it can be any value between 1 and 4. Now let's come to the next point, that is third one, the straight point. That is, the lower limit of the first class should be either 0 or 5 or multiple of 5. For example, if the lower value of the data is 63 and we have taken a class interval of 10, then the first class should be 60 to 70 rather than 63 to 73. Similarly, if the lowest value of the data is 76 and the class interval is 5, then the first class should be 75 to 80 rather than 76 to 81. Fourth point, to ensure continuity and to get correct class interval, we should adopt exclusive method of classification. However, where inclusive method has been adopted, it is necessary to make an adjustment to determine the correct class intervals and to have continuity. The adjustments consist of finding the differences between the lower limit of the second class and the upper limit of the first class, dividing the difference by 2 and subtracting the value so obtained from all lower limits and adding this value to all the upper limits. This can be expressed in the form of a formula as given, which is called as the correction factor, and it is equal to lower limit of the second class minus the upper limit of the first class, the whole thing divided by 2. Let's come to the fifth point. The intervals should be equal for all classes. If intervals are not of uniform width, it is difficult to make the meaningful comparison between classes. At times, however, extreme items may require the inclusion of so many class intervals that frequency distribution will become unwieldy. The items are then classified as 200, 200 to 400, 400 to 600, 600 to 800, and above 800. These classes are called open-end size classes and the frequency distribution. When the frequency distribution is being employed as a technique of presentation, only open-end classes do not seriously reduce its usefulness as long as only a few items fall in these classes. However, use of the distribution for purposes of further mathematical computation is frustrated because a midpoint value which can be used to represent the class cannot be determined for an open-end class. Sixth point, in any frequency distribution, the size of the items or the value are indicated on the left-hand side, and the number of items, the item in whose sizes or values have repeated, are indicated by frequencies on the right-hand side opposite to respective size or value. For statistical presentation, the methods available are: data may be, first one, incorporated in a paragraph of text or put into a tabular form or expressed graphically. First one, text presentation. In this method, data is presented combining text and figures. The following is an example of text presentation. For example, merchant vessels of 500 gross tons and over. In 1986, there were 2,319 vessels and the total gross tonnage was 20,522,000 tons. In 1996, the number of vessels had reduced to 1573. The total gross tonnage had increased by 45.4%. In 1986, there were 191 passenger vessels. Gross tonnage 1971,000 tons. In 1637, trams and cargo liners, gross tonnage 10,694,000 tons. 491 tankers, gross tonnage 7,857,000 tons. In 1986, bulk carriers were included with trams and cargo liners. In 1996, bulk carriers were shown separately. Combining figures and text is not particularly effective device since it is necessary to read or at least scan the entire paragraph before one can grasp the meaning of the entire set of figures. Most persons cannot easily comprehend the data when set forth in this manner, and it is especially difficult for the reader to single out individual figures. There is the advantage, however, that the writer can direct attention to and thus emphasize certain figures and can also call attention to comparison of importance. Second point, tabular presentation. A table is a systematic organization of statistical data in columns and rows. Rows are horizontal arrangement, whereas columns are vertical ones. The purpose of a table is to simplify the presentation and to facilitate comparisons. The simplification results from the clear-cut and systematic arrangement, which enables the reader to quickly locate desired information. Comparison is facilitated by bringing related items of information close together. The significance of tabulation will be clear from the following points. The first one, it simplifies complex data. When data are tabulated, all unnecessary details and repetitions are avoided. Data are presented systematically in columns and rows. Hence, the reader a very clear idea of what the table represents. There is thus a considerable saving in time taken in understanding what is represented by the data, and all confusion is avoided. Also, a large amount of space is saved because of the non-duplication of headings and designation. The description at the top of the column serves for all the items beneath it. Second point, it facilitates comparison. Tabulation facilitates comparison. Since a table is divided into various parts, and for each part there is total and subtotals, the relationship between different parts of data can be studied much more easily with the help of tables than without it. The reader is saved the needless exercise of memory. Third point, it gives an identity to the data. When the data are arranged in the table with a title and a number, they can be distinctly identified and be used as a source reference in the interpretation of a problem. Fourth point, it reveals pattern. Tabulation reveals pattern within the figures which cannot be seen in the narrative form. It also facilitates the summation of the figures if the reader desires to check the totals. The number of parts of a table may vary from case to case depending upon the given data. But good table must contain at least the following parts. The first one, table number. Each table should be numbered. There are different practices with regard to the place where this number is to be given. The number may be given either in the center at the top above the title, or in the side of the title at the top, or in the bottom of the table on the left hand side. Title of the table. Every table must have a suitable title. The title is a description of the content of the table. A complete title has to answer the questions what, where, and when in that sequence. The title should be clear, brief, and self-explanatory. However, clarity should not be sacrificed for the sake of brevity. Long titles cannot read as promptly as short titles, but at times they may have to be used for the sake of clarity. The title should be so worded that it permits on and only one interpretation. It should be in the form of a series of phrases rather than complete sentences. Its lettering should be the most prominent of any lettering on the table. Say third one, caption. It refers to the column headings. It explains what the column represents. It may consist of one or more column headings. Under a column heading, there may be subheads. The caption should be clearly defined and placed at the middle of the column. If the different columns are expressed in different units, the units should be mentioned with the captions. As compared with the main part of the table, the caption should be shown in smaller letters. This helps in saving space. Fourth one, stub. As distinguished from the caption, stubs are the designations of the rows or row headings. They are at the extreme left and perform the same functions for the horizontal rows of numbers in the table as a column heading do for the vertical columns of numbers. The stubs are usually wider than column heading, but should be kept as narrow as possible without sacrificing precision and clarity of statements. Fifth one, body. The body of the table contains the numerical information. This is the most vital part of the table. Data presented in the body arranged according to descriptions are classifications of the captions and stubs. Sixth one, head note. It is a brief explanatory statement applying to all or a major part of the material in the table and is placed below the title, centered and enclosed in brackets. It is used to explain certain points on relating to the whole table that have not been included in the title nor in the captions or stubs. Last one, footnote. Anything in a table which cannot be understood by the reader from the title, captions and stubs should be explained in footnotes. If footnotes are needed, they are placed directly below the body of the table. In very general terms, tabulation may be distinguished as simple and complex. Simple table. A simple table contains data representing one characteristic only. You can see that in the table 3 is the case of simple tabulation. This table is capable of furnishing an approximation to the answer to an inquiry into the ordinary marks obtained by the student in the test of physics. It tells for the instance that the number of students getting marks between 25 and 30 is the highest. It may also be classified as a single table as it answers one or more groups of independent questions. Next one, complex table. A complex table may contain figures relating to several characteristics. It may also be classified as double, triple or manifold table. Double tabulation. Double tabulation shows the subdivision of data according to two categories and is capable of answering two mutually dependent questions. This table shows the distribution of route mileage of class 1 railways in India into railway zone and gauges. Route mileage of Class 1 railways in India as per source Department of Railway. Triple tabulation. Triple tabulation subdivides the data into 3 distinct categories and answers 3 mutually dependent questions. This one is a blank table for showing distribution of population according to sex and literacy in different states of India. In the table, words L, I and T are showing literate, illiterate and total. Table 5, distribution of population according to sex and literacy in different states in India as per source Department of Census Operations. This table is able to answer the extent of literacy in the given states, sex-wise extent of literacy in the given states, and the position of literacy as a whole in these states. Manifold tabulation. Manifold tabulation is one that divides the total into several categories, generally more than 3. So let's quickly summarize what we have learned in today's session. We have learned today collection and classification of data. In this script, we have studied the meaning of collection and classification of data, its objective and its type. We have also discussed the ways in which available data can be classified, and we have also determined the methods of presenting the statistical data. Also, different categories of data required for statistical analysis have also been discussed. So that brings us towards the end of today's episode. We are ending here and we'll see you again discussing about our next topic on presentation of data. Have a nice time. Bye and thank you.